Joining us now to talk about the Republican Party, former Majority Leader Dick Armey, Dede Scozzafava, who is a moderate Republican and former congressional candidate, and Ed Gillespie, former chairman of the Republican National Committee. Good morning to you all.
Good morning.
The headlines out of the GOP this week, this notion of Republican National Committee considering a list of 10 principles. Some have called them the GOP 10 Commandments, which include things like support for the surge in Afghanistan or opposition, for instance, to the Obama health plan. As a candidate, if you agree with the 8 out of 10, you'll get support from the national GOP. And if you don't, you're out of luck. Dick Armey, is this litmus test a good idea?
First of all, it's not a litmus test. Secondly, it is being offered for consideration in the party.
Right.
And I think thirdly, it is 7 out of the 10. But if you read the list, at least 5 of the 10 are right at the center post of the Big Ten of American politics today, fiscal conservatism. Mm-hmm. And I think if the Republican Party is going to win any future elections, it has to be presented as an alternative to the Democrat Party's fiscal spending, and in fact, it's a very reasonable thing to say if you want the support of the Republican Party, demonstrate some allegiance to the primary positions taken by the party. That's not a litmus test. That's just say, if you want us to give you our money, our support, our troops in the field, mm-hmm. our endorsements, then demonstrate that you're someone like us.
Ed Gillespie, some have called this pact, or the idea of this pact, because apparently the GOP will have a serious conversation about this over the next couple of months to decide whether or not to adopt it. Some have called it a suicide pact. Is it a good idea?
Well, look, Harry, I think a good, vigorous debate inside the party about our principles and our policies is a healthy thing for an out-of-power party trying to make its way back. I suspect if you look at those 10 things that a Republican running in a primary for Congress against another Republican, the Republican who agrees with 9 out of those 10 will beat the Republican who agrees with 7 out of those 10. Mm-hmm. The question for me is it, in terms of as a former chairman, as I look at it, what if you have a Republican who agrees with 7 out of those 10 things running against a Democrat who agrees with 0 out of those 10 things, and you want to put some money into a race to try to win back the House, and you're constrained from doing that? I'm not sure that would be in the best interest of the party at the end of the day. So I think a vigorous debate over these things is healthy, but I also think as a party, we need to be careful to make sure that we don't constrain our ability to win back the majority. When I was working for Dick Armey, when he was majority leader, we had a lot of Republicans in New York, New Jersey. I think of folks like Sherry Boehlert or Chris Shays in Connecticut who didn't agree necessarily with everything. But we were debating tax cuts and balanced budgets and welfare reform. And today you look at the Democratic majority, they're raising taxes, they have government takeover of health care. So I think getting back the majority is important, and we ought not constrain our ability to do that.
Because in the end, this is what this is really all about. Let me ask Dede a question. Have you had a chance to see this list?
I have.
Yeah, and would you have been able to at least agree on 7 or 8 out of 10?
I would have been at 7 out of 10 on the list. I had the opportunity to review the list this past week, and I would have been at 7 out of 10. If people looked at my record and understood how I felt about a lot of the federal issues, I think they could see that I was for lower taxes, lower government spending. I was not in favor of repeal of the 2003 tax cuts. I am not in favor of an estate tax. There were many things in that platform that I would be okay with. And if you look at the Syracuse Post-Standard and the editorial review board that I went through in Syracuse, and you read the editorial conclusion, you could see they arrived at the conclusion that I was a fiscal conservative, and that's after a 2-hour editorial board.
Right. At the same time,
cap and trade.
Right.
Go ahead.
Which is also on that list, to oppose cap and trade.
Right, which I would have been a no on cap and trade. I would have been a no on the health care bill as it's currently presented.
Yet a conservative insurgent in your district, you ended up ceding the nomination to him. Is this kind of a list, a do or die list, in the end counterproductive? Because in your district, in the 23rd district, which I'm familiar with, if somebody would have suggested a year ago a Democrat would have been elected there, they would have been laughed at. There's a Democrat who's going to Congress now.
I think you've got to look at the predecessor. John McHugh served this district very well. He was a moderate. Some of the positions that I got criticized for taking were positions that John already had. I think it's important that sometimes there are regional differences. Even as Mr. Army represented Texas, there are certain things that he voted against that are right on the litmus test, the 10 steps. So I think there's got to be some understanding. The most important thing we can do as Republicans, I think, and the leadership can do as Republicans, are driving a message that brings us together. And I absolutely agree with Mr. Gillespie when we talk about things like fiscal conservatism, lower taxes, less government spending. The pocketbook issues are the things that are most important to people today.
Mr. Army, did it work? The push by conservatives to try to seize control, by the people to seize control, which is a sort of one of the ideas of the Tea Party movement, did it work in the 23rd District?
No, actually, what happened in 23rd District was the Republicans lost that race when they nominated Dede. And my activists on the ground contacted me and said that. The Conservative Party stayed out of the race until they saw that despite the fact that she had the full and enthusiastic and generous support of the Republican Party, she was losing the race. She was already clearly falling, dropping like a brick before the Conservative candidate got in the race. So the fact of the matter was, even the Democrat was running against her as a big spender. She was a bad fit for that race. Had there been an electoral primary process, she wouldn't have won the primary, she wouldn't have been the candidate, and the Republican would win the race. That's what I predict will happen in the fall. Probably the most heartbreaking thing of that event was, as she found herself falling so far, so fast, despite all the support she had, when she dropped out, she endorsed the Democrat. That makes it very difficult for her to come back in this primary that'll be opening up for next year and saying, I want to run as a Republican. I think she burned a bridge there that will probably not be one that can be rebuilt, even with massive federal funds.
Let me ask Ed Gillespie this question. Is moderate a dirty word now in the Republican Party?
No, I don't believe it is. The fact is that, as Leader Army knows, in the 26th District of Texas, what it takes to get elected as a Republican where he was from is different than what it might take in New England to get elected, or in California. And as Ronald Reagan said, someone who agrees with the 80% of the time is my friend. I think the important thing is we have seen the Democrats elect moderates who don't agree with every platform, every plank in their party's platform. And in the process, the Democratic Party hasn't moved to the right. If anything, it's moved to the left, Harry, if you look at the agenda they're trying to pass. So I think that we can be a party that gets the majority, 218 seats in the House, that has some folks in New England, California, other places who may not agree with Leader Army or me on everything. But we have an agenda where we're cutting taxes, not raising them, where we're giving people power, not taking it away.
But let's talk about Lindsey Graham, who's a frequent guest on this program. His ratings from the Conservative Union are 90%. He's under fire. There's a big piece in the New York Times today in South Carolina because he's not conservative enough. Can someone with that kind of credentials be not conservative enough?
Well, Lindsey Graham, as you know, has been elected statewide in South Carolina twice now, I'm pretty sure. I think he's in his second term in the United States Senate. Very popular. Look, we have a lot of internal discussion in the party right now, and that's a healthy thing. The fact is, because there's a sense of opportunity in the Republican Party that we can win House seats and Senate seats, we have vigorous primaries going on. That is the right problem to have. It's also not constrained, by the way, to the Republican Party. If you look at the Democrats, you have MoveOn.org and some left-wing groups now attacking Democrats who voted against a government-run health care system. So that vigorous debate goes on inside of both parties.
Right.
But I think that if we're doing it in a way where it's healthy and respectful, and there's an open process, we're best as a bottom-up party.
Right.
I think what Dick Armey was saying about New York 23, we had 11 people choose a nominee as opposed to an open, transparent primary. That's better for us.
Basically, the county chairman. Dick Armey, some people suggest that the Republicans are fighting a demographic battle that they can't win. That this is going to end up being exclusionary, and you'll end up in a position of not being able to take back the seats you want to take back in this next year.
I don't think that's true at all. In fact, if the party that responds to the energy that's found in the public, and right now that energy is found in the small government conservative movement that is looking at some sense of fiscal responsibility. That party that captures their attention will be the party that will win in massive terms. I think the Republican Party is in a great position. Look at the more moderate Republican that won the governorship in New Jersey on a margin of votes provided by the small government conservatives who abandoned their candidate for him because he had a chance to win. Watch Governor Castle as he runs for the Senate. There's plenty of room for the more moderate people to win elections if they fit their district. But if in fact you nominate a person who can't win in their district, then you should expect that person will lose the election.
Dede, let me ask you this question. Do you think you were too moderate?
Sure. No, I don't. And to Mr. Army's point, I was up by 7 percentage points mid-October, and there was a lot of Washington that all of a sudden, and the Club for Growth and the right side of the party that all of a sudden flooded the market, distorted my record, and it was very difficult to counter that. I think it was very difficult for leadership at the RNC not to cave in to the pressure that they were receiving from the right. Listen, at the end of the day, I know my record, I know my district, I've worked closely with John McHugh, and it's unfortunate what happened. And at the end of the day, I think I made the decision that was best for the assembly district that I represent, the constituents that I represent here, and the importance of Fort Drum to this area. I hope in the end, what we can have is an inclusive Republican Party that's focused on fiscal principles, and I'm hopeful that we can do that.
Perhaps that is one thing you all can agree on. Ed Gillespie, I'm going to wrap up with you. Will the Republicans get a majority control in the House of Representatives in this next election? I have 20 seconds.
Harry, 3 months ago I would have said not likely. 3 months from now, I think I'm going to say very likely.
All right, Ed, thank you so much. Dede Scozzafava, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank
Dick
you.
Armey, appreciate your input as well.